Welcome to episode 2 of our special edition series of the HealthChangers Podcast, powered by Innovation Force. This segment is brought to you by Cambia Health Solutions. In HealthChangers, powered by Innovation Force, Cambia's Chief Innovation Officer and SVP, Mohan Nair, sits down with industry leaders and influencers to explore the real stories behind healthcare innovation and transformation. You'll hear thought leaders share their motivation for changing the way consumers experience healthcare and learn about the challenges they've faced. And you'll gain practical insights to inform your own healthcare journey.
Listeners, I'm very excited to introduce this podcast that I've been waiting for many years because I've met this gentleman named Gary Mortensen. Gary is president of Stoller Family Estates. He's got about 20 years of senior leadership experience in the Oregon wine industry, but he's also a startup veteran, and he brings a lot of passion for leading edge technology and pushing boundaries. So he's applied all of that knowledge into winemaking and wine delivery. But he's also a devoted historian. He's an award-winning director of 2 documentary films relating to military history. And he's really focused on the stories of Oregonians who've served in the combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, in times of tough times that we all live under, I was hoping that this conversation between Gary and myself, that we can share a conversation about values and how values transpose to action, and that we can talk about COVID-19 and what the transformation of our industries that we both serve, and how they all converge, where health and the business of winemaking, veterans, and the story of the documentation that comes with this life we now live can be expressed in a short conversation that brings together the idea of battling this new battle that we all face, but then also dealing with the inner battles that we all face in the caring of our community and the sharing with our community. Welcome, Gary.
Well, thank you for having me, Mohan.
It's been a while. You know, we met a long while ago. Do you remember when we first met?
I do. I think it was probably 2001 or 2002, somewhere right in there, at the startup that I was working at called Cusant. And
yes.
I remember this interesting man walking down the hallway, and I thought I hadn't seen him before. And you were kind enough to introduce yourself, and it didn't take long before we realized that we were kindred spirits around things like music and history.
That's right. It was a Howard Schultz company that invested. Howard Schultz venture fund invested in your company, and I had started to advise it. And next thing you know, we get to know each other a little. We are friends from a slow burn, I think. We met then, and we met multiple times in different situations, in the different roles you've taken and I've taken, and that has blossomed into a conversation today, and one that deserves a conversation, because now you're president of Stoller Family Estates, and tell us a little bit about what Stoller Family Estates is all about.
Well, it starts with Bill Stoller, who is a native Oregonian, grew up in the town of Dayton. If anyone has been to Stoller Family Estate before, it's a beautiful piece of property. And he actually farmed that land as a kid. So he was born on the property. It was a family, his uncles, that the property at the time. And he's an entrepreneur. He decided that at some point he loved wine. He loved the camaraderie of wine, the interaction with people over wine. And as a people person, he thought, well, maybe I'll be convinced to start a small label. And it started to grow. And that comes for me full forward to 2012 when I joined the company. And the winery was making about 9,000 cases of wine at the time. And on my first day, I was standing out there with Bill, and we were looking at the sunset, and it was this beautiful sunset over the west. And he looked at me and just casually said, you know, I like to build companies that last at least 200 years. And that was a really profound moment for me, having come recently from startups, tech startups in particular, where kind of the operative word is exit. When are we going to exit? How big is the exit going to be? And then to sit there with someone who is looking well past his own life, several generations ahead, and talking about this kind of vision, it really, for me, cemented everything and validated about why I wanted to come back into the wine industry. And so it's really been a love affair being involved in this organization, because it is nice to be part of something that stands for something. And we like to say that sustainability to us, and really kind of the core of Stoller is there's sustainability in three phases. There's the environmental sustainability, there's the economic sustainability, and there's the community-based sustainability. And so we try to practice all of those things. And so that, I think, in terms of the essence of what we're trying to do, that's Stoller.
Yeah, well, that's an extremely powerful description of an alignment of your ideology and the ideology of Bill Stoller, and also the people that serve the wines that we drink. And that's a powerful message to start this conversation with, and I thank you for it. Now, what's so interesting is, a 100-year-old company, Cambia, is also in the 100th year and has enjoyed 100 years of serving our community. And think about that, right? But there is no guarantee that we have the right to consider ourselves available every day of the year, given the COVID crisis and affecting all of the elements of sustainability you just mentioned. And it goes without saying that we have to talk about that topic, given the current transformative moment we are all facing. And the irony is, I was meeting your team and Bill just about a month ago or so, wasn't it?
It was about 2 months ago, and it was there was no conversation at all about COVID at the time. I think it was one of those things where Mohan, you were kind enough to come out and address our broader company for our staff retreat, and Mohan speaks so well about transformational change and the both for us personally and as organizations. And to this day, it was one of the most powerful investments that we've ever made in terms of our time on anything in the 8 years that I've now been involved in the winery, because everyone was immediately impacted by your conversation with them. I think what it did was it helped to awaken within each one of our team members sort of that thought process of what does that really mean. It's not just a book you read or a catchphrase, but it's actually taking time and to contemplate where do you want to be in terms of your own personal growth. And from that, you're able to look at your organization. And it really resonated with so many of our team members. It was really powerful.
I really appreciate that. I mean, it's a life work on my part and a life journey on yours. What was irony of it, that was the reason I brought it up, was here we are 2 months ago talking about personal transformation and business transformation and transformation of our community and our society and how they're all linked. And then we get this happening. And now your organization and mine are facing those very realities of a world transformed through one person having an illness somewhere, right? And an entire world transformed, entire business transformed, and an entire psychopathology of our country and our nation transformed in an instant. So how are you dealing with that business discontinuity in a service-oriented business about grapes and wine and people? How are you dealing with it? How's Stoller dealing with it? How are you entering into this? And what have you been doing lately with respect to those challenges?
It's kind of three parts. And one part of this is I spent 11 years in the Oregon wine industry from 1988 to 1999. And there was I think that informed a lot of, let's call it base information and institutional knowledge around this industry. And then in 1999, I left and didn't come back for 13 years and spent all of that time in technology startups, creating documentary films and doing things that had nothing to do with wine. And so to marry those two halves of my careers together, And I think then to apply the idea and belief that transformational change is required and welcomed and to a moment like this is critical. And on top of that, when I arrived in 2012, my whole goal was not to come in and run a winery. My whole goal was to come in and build and run an agile company. And the fact that it's a winery is cool, but that wasn't the first thing. It was to build a team that understood that we were many things, and a winery is among those things. But agility and being able to grow with opportunity was something that was more important to me, and to follow our ethos. All of those were more important than the fact that we were producing wine, because in my mind, whatever we produce should be produced with pride. And so we're lucky enough that our products are wine. But in a time like this, the cards that not only were we dealt, but all 800 wineries in Oregon and across the nation and the globe were dealt, was the fact that tasting room business was shut down, and the other half of our business, which is our distribution business, where a large distributor or small distributor will sell people's products into stores and restaurants, to look at the restaurant business also being cratered. So then we're really left with, for us, it was our grocery store business, which was of the three legs of that stool, tasting room, restaurant, and grocery. Grocery was the smallest. And so this was a supreme challenge and moment for us. And what I didn't want my team to ever use was the word crisis. And I asked them all to replace the word crisis with the word opportunity, and to challenge us to become innovative on a level that we hadn't done before. And so we began with that moment in mid-March, understanding that things were going to be very different. And we began to not really worry about a 200-year vision or even a 2-month vision, but to focus on March. That would be the last 2 weeks of March and what we're going to do. And then we're going to get to April, and we're going to just determine, based on a real-world unfolding scenario, what we can control is what's in front of us only.
Understood. During the toughest times in our history, and I know you're a historian, both in the high-tech world and in the generations prior to technology being a dominant force, innovations surfaced. New structural changes opened up. And so as you think through your winery business and the realization that this is a serious transformation of our country and our world and our own selves, how are you viewing innovation and brainstorming, and how do you see innovation playing in your marketplace right now?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a quantum shift right now, and I've been feeling for some time now that the future of marketing for wines needs to shift. It needs to change, because the way we're consuming information as a general public is shifting and changing at all times. Information is miniaturizing to our handheld devices. And yet the wine industry is one of those sort of legacy-based systems that still prints out stat sheets with things about pH and acidity and all this stuff, and they leave it in little folders that look nice. And that's still a lot of how business is done in this industry. And to me, that was ripe for change. And so we decided, actually earlier this year, and then we just really ramped it up, was to create as much of our content as possible in digital format and deliver it in ways that were both educational, informative, and entertaining, and most importantly, succinct. 60 to 90 seconds, and being able to deliver great amounts of information that was both entertaining on some things, a cooking show, recipes, to more informational around, here's our 2019 Stoller Rosé, as told to you by our winemaker. And that format right now is really something that's taking off. And I think that's really correct. I think that's where the future is going. And the big danger for an organization is that they start this and then they don't continue with the momentum. And so part of our transformational change is I have signaled to our organization that it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic or if there's not a pandemic. We are going to go all in on content creation and content delivery.
The entire service of health is at threat right now. I mean, your business is one where you grow grapes, you have people pick them out after they've been nurtured and loved, and then you transform them, some chemical reaction and some fermentation, you produce something people like to drink casually at their dining table or in a restaurant. That energy is all people oriented. And in that energy that's fully people oriented, people are involved. And you have people walking the fields, engaging in nurturing wine, nurturing the precursors to wine. You have them serving you, and they are all under stress right now. They are all challenged in terms of health, in terms of their own financial model, and especially their own physical threats when they are there. How are you helping that community succeed? And when I mean that community, it involves all of them, from the people who pick the wine, to nurture the wine, all the way to the winemakers, all the way to the ones who deliver wine. How are you thinking through the health of your institution?
Thank you for that question. A very important question. And it is fascinating when you think about our business that we are agriculture, manufacturing, wholesale, and retail. So check most of the boxes there in our industry. Yeah. And each one has its own set of unique sort of challenges. But the bottom line is, and again, back to someone like Bill Stoller, Bill Stoller also invested and built an HR company called Zenium. And it's really a powerful resource for us to have access to. And we have to acknowledge that for many workers out there, what's happening in our economy right now is just devastating, because many of these folks live paycheck to paycheck. And the idea of someone not feeling great it outweighs staying at home sometimes and instead going to work because they need that paycheck so badly. So the kinds of structural support that we can give them is so important. And we have everything from full HR resources all the way to mental health resources for our workers, to the fact that we haven't furloughed anyone in our organization. And we don't intend to. It's one of those things where we wanted our team to understand that we stand with them. These are going to be tough times, and we would rather embrace the idea of moving forward as an organization and becoming innovators and agile and transformational versus taking let's just say a knee-jerk reaction and furloughing people and then just writing it out. And for those organizations that have done that, they've done it probably because they had to in a business context. We've chosen that we will ride this out together. And what we've seen from that has been, I think, going back to sort of this idea of mental health, has been that organization understands that we've invested in them, and this organization has responded in a way that will be one for the ages. Our budgets, along with everybody else's, were severely compromised, especially when you consider, again, that 2 of the 3 of our legs of our stool were knocked out from underneath us. And yet somehow our teams have been able to innovate and find ways to beat last year's numbers for both March and April. And at the same time, our vineyard crews have managed to not only do what they did last year, but take on another 80 acres this year of newly acquired acreage. Our winemaking team continues to show up and make wine at the same excellent levels. And so what everyone has done is they've said, we've got to practice social distancing. We've got to wear masks. We've got to sanitize. Small prices to pay for keeping everybody working and coming and keeping morale high. And so everyone has become owners in this organization. And a dear friend of mine, a friend of ours, Pat Cox, my former CEO at Cusant, once said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, Gary, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's owners and there's renters. And that's always stuck with me, because you can have someone who's been with you for 20 years, and at some point they've just decided that they're just going to be a renter. Or you could have someone who comes in and they've been there a day, and they're out there, they see litter on the ground, and they're picking it up, or they're doing conscientious things. And that's someone that you want to have around your organization for a long time. And what we've seen is we have an organization full of owners, people that are taking extreme pride in the work that they're doing, and watching each other out for each other, and doing everything they can to help us be successful. And the net result of that is that this company is just reinventing itself in front of ourselves, and it's been powerful to be part of.
Yeah, it is, and I think a lot has to do with your philosophy, and the highlight of our conversation to me is the linkage between your values and how those values and the common values of the institution, led by Bill Stoller, of course, and then expressed through you with your values. And as I've had the pleasure of meeting all of your staff, all the people who work in your organization, that common belief in being an owner of the land and a custodian of the land, and to engage that land the right way. That's the power that I see. And I mean the word owner of the land, not from the perspective of having authority over it, but having a custodial responsibility. Now, your movie-making career is really centered around military, and there seems to be a connection between you and your father's military. I know your father's story that you've shared with me, and it's about veterans, and it's about veterans' legacies. And you have really formed a not-for-profit that focuses on that to kind of preserve and honor and educate the veterans' legacy. At this time, where people aging through vulnerability is being threatened like a level that we've never seen before. There's always comparisons to World War II and the impact to lives now. And we've all been humbled by our vulnerability today. But we should not forget the work you're doing with veterans. So tell us about how that is healing in its own way, the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, this is my interaction with veterans is a personal one, because I had a father who had survivor's guilt, and navigating my life through his anger and his confusion about what had happened for me was my growing up experience. And yet at the same time, I was a kid who grew up, baby boomer, who grew up inculcated into the romance of World War II. And somehow all of that came together for an appreciation, a deep appreciation of military history and the human condition. And I was fascinated after we invaded Iraq, and really kind of trying to understand what was happening as my kids were getting older, and hearing about so much that was going on in Iraq through the filter of politics, and not really ever hearing what the soldiers themselves were witnessing. And so I thought that it would be interesting to try to chronicle some of their stories. And what was fascinating about this time of our civilization was the convenience of all of the personal recording devices that brought back not just firefights and things like that, but to me the more interesting things was the mundane activities and the griping and the goofing around that all these young soldiers were doing all the time, that's really humanized them. When they've got their serious look on and a gun pulled, that's the image that we all associate a soldier with, but there was so many more dimensions. And that really created for me, an opportunity to give them the chance to tell the story that they wanted to tell. So very much like winemaking, you start with good stock, good fruit, or good stories, and you get the hell out of the way and you let them just manifest themselves. And that's really what happened here. And all that I tried to do was ask them good questions and then knit their stories together and fill it in with the footage that they provided to me. And it resonated, because I think it was there was no political agenda whatsoever. It was simply to let these guys tell a story. And the fascinating thing for me was that along this way, I started to understand my father. And I thought that was something that wasn't anticipated, and it was very powerful. And at the same time, my mother was dying of cancer, and I started to understand loss. And watching it through these 20, 21, 22-year-old kids who are losing their friends, it became an incredibly profound experience for me personally. And then to know that you don't just come back and assimilate, and understanding the long-term impacts of this kinds of stress and shock and loss, that it is something that is very intimate to each person that comes back, and each one of them handles it in a different way. And I think that being respectful of that was something that I tried to tell in the storytelling process. And
yeah, as I listen to you, I'm gratified that someone is doing that work, because we have voices that are not heard, and you are bringing that to light using storytelling as a powerful vehicle, and I'm grateful to you for that. Anything you feel you need to communicate to our listeners? I mean, this is going to go far and wide, as we can guess. You have a platform and you've always used it. Well, here's another platform. What message would you send to our community of listeners that you feel is important to send at this very time and in this very space?
There's always a way out of everything. And sometimes those are little solutions, and sometimes those are big solutions. And I certainly can say on my side of the world that there isn't anything we could probably do to develop a cure, but that we know that there are other people that are. And so what we can do from our perspective is support our community in ways that are big and small. I think that this is a moment for all of us to remember that kindness is a obligation for all of us, to be more patient, more tolerant, to check on your neighbor, to reconnect with a family member. It's a sobering moment, and yet it's a wonderful moment for that. And I think that is something that all of us talk about at the winery within the organization is that life is precious. I had a dear friend, Bill Seitz, who was a B-24 pilot in World War II. He flew over 90 missions with the 9th Air Force, including some pretty hairy stuff over Germany. And every time I saw Bill, I would say, "Bill, how are you?" And he would look at me and he'd say the same thing every single time. He'd say, "Every day's a gift." And I think we need to live by that every day is indeed a gift. And sometimes it's a hard day, but there's beauty in every day. And I think we have to find that, even amongst all of this uncertainty. And if we can do that, we can get through this together, but we have to rely on each other.
I know now is not the time to enjoy, but now is the time to be contemplative and humble and share. But there will be a time when you and I can actually shake hands and engage and sit together in a social context and share a glass of Stoller wine. And I hope that time comes soon. But in between that time and now, I want to tell you how much I respect the work that you do, the way in which you do it, and the nature and with the gratitude you engage your day-to-day. And I am really proud to be your friend and proud to be your colleague. And thank you for sharing this with us today at HealthChangers.
And thank you for being such a great mentor to me, because much of my philosophy has been shaped by you. So I truly am humbled by our friendship.
Right back at you. Thank you very much.
That wraps up this episode of HealthChangers, powered by Innovation Force. You can find more information on all of our episodes at cambiahealth.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at Cambia, CAMBIA. You can find Innovation Force on Twitter at Innovation Force and Mohan at Mohan Emerge. Please subscribe to HealthChangers on your favorite platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, and leave a review. Thanks for listening.